Have you ever spent your whole life standing by someone only to realize too late that their words were slowly breaking you down? It sounds shocking. But many Indian men after 65 are silently suffering in relationships where the pain is not physical but emotional. You may not talk about it. You may not even recognize it. But the feeling is their loneliness in your own home, confusion when your dignity is dismissed, and silence when your heart needs to be heard. In this video, we are going to talk about 5 specific phrases a woman might say that are not just careless words, they are warning signs. Signs that your emotional well-being, your peace, and even your health could be at risk. Recognizing these words could save you from years of hidden suffering. So please, stay with me till the end. It might be the most important conversation you hear today. Before we begin, I would truly love to know where are you watching this from and what time of day is it for you. Please share in the comments. Even a simple moment from your daily life is something I deeply value. And if you find this content helpful, do subscribe to the channel so you never miss these important insights again. Have you ever noticed how a simple phrase can stay in your mind not because of the words, but because of the feeling it leaves behind? For many older adults in India, especially men over 60, health is not just about the body. It is also about what happens silently in the heart and mind. You may feel a heaviness when someone questions your choices, or a quiet ache when your voice is ignored in your own home. This emotional strain may not show up in blood tests or x-rays, but over time it builds up like dust in the corners of an old Haveli. And just like dust, if left untouched, it begins to affect everything. The air you breathe, the peace you feel, and even how your body functions. In cities like Pune, Chennai, or Lucknow, many elders report rising blood pressure, disturbed sleep, and sudden loss of appetite. But what's surprising is that doctors often find no serious disease behind these symptoms, just unspoken stress and emotional fatigue. Science explains this clearly. When your brain is exposed to repeated emotional stress, it releases a hormone called cortisol. Too much cortisol over time can weaken your immune system, disturb your digestion, and affect your heart health. It even impacts the hippocampus, a part of the brain responsible for memory, which is why emotional neglect is linked to faster memory decline in old age. Let us take the example of Mr. Prakash from Coimbatore, a retired railway officer who shared that he was often told, "You should not go out alone anymore." At first, it sounded like concern from his spouse. But gradually, it became a rule where he could go, what he could eat, even who he could speak to. He stopped meeting his walking group at the park and missed the evening bhajans at the temple. Within months, he lost interest in activities he once loved. His energy dropped. He began forgetting names. But when his medical reports came normal, the doctor gently asked about his home life. This is the silent reality of many Indian seniors. Health is not only about tablets or tonics. It is deeply connected to independence, self-worth, and emotional safety. When your choices are taken away under the name of protection, your body feels it too, slowly, quietly, but powerfully. That's why in this video, we will speak openly about 5 phrases that may sound harmless but carry hidden emotional weight. Not to blame anyone, but to bring awareness. Because when you recognize the signs early, you give yourself a chance to act wisely and protect your health, dignity, and peace. And remember, your health is not only your responsibility, it is your right. Before we begin, I want to ask you, where are you watching this from? And what time is it? Whether it is a small village in Odisha or a flat in Gurgaon, your moment matters to me. Please share in the comments below. And if you find this helpful, subscribe to this channel so you never miss conversations that honor your wisdom and well-being. In many Indian homes, especially in our older years, it becomes hard to explain why we feel tired, disconnected, or constantly anxious despite normal health reports. You may be eating on time, taking your medicines regularly, and even going for your morning walks. Yet something inside feels drained, like a quiet heaviness that you carry every day without a clear reason. Often, that feeling is not from the body. It comes from the loss of emotional freedom, something most elders in India are silently experiencing. This is not just a story of one person. It is something happening quietly in many homes, from Mumbai apartments to small towns like Salem or Jabalpur. Let me tell you about Mr. Hari, a 75-year-old retired engineer from Nagpur who lived a disciplined and respectful life. In the early years of retirement, he enjoyed hobbies like gardening, visiting the temple, and weekly lunches with his old colleagues. But over time, his wife began questioning his outings, his purchases, even his phone conversations. At first, it looked like concern. Questions like, "Where are you going?" or "Why do you need to meet them again?" But slowly, those questions turned into instructions, and the instructions became restrictions. What began as mild curiosity became daily interference in decisions he once made confidently on his own. She would criticize how he arranged his schedule, how he handled money, or who he spent time with. In public gatherings, she would speak over him, correct him, or dismiss his ideas with a sigh or a shake of the head. This pattern, which seemed harmless at first, slowly made him withdraw from friends, from conversations, and from his own joy. Now here's where science helps us understand the deeper impact. Repeated emotional control activates a part of the brain called the amygdala, which handles our fear and stress response. Under constant pressure, the brain releases cortisol, a hormone that, when elevated for long, begins to damage memory, mood, and even sleep cycles. Chronic emotional stress has been linked to weakened immunity, poor digestion, and early signs of cognitive decline. And in seniors, especially those above 65, this imbalance can lead to increased risk of anxiety, depression, and even heart strain. But the danger doesn't end with the mind or the body. When your independence is constantly questioned, your sense of identity begins to fade. You no longer feel like the person you were. You hesitate before speaking, you doubt your own choices, and worst of all, you begin to isolate yourself. Many Indian elders stop attending satsangs, avoid weddings, or skip social visits, not because they are physically weak, but because they feel emotionally small. For Mr. Hari, the turning point came when he realized this control was not love. It was fear in disguise. Fear of change, fear of losing authority, and fear of being alone. But love, true love, does not control. It supports, it listens, and it allows space to breathe. To every elder in India listening to this, please remember, your independence is not a luxury. It is part of your health. When you take back your voice, your choices, and your dignity, your body and mind will thank you. Because healing in old age begins not with more medicine, but with more respect. There comes a time in life, often after the age of 65, when silence begins to speak louder than words, and small remarks begin to weigh heavily on the heart. In many Indian homes, especially in close-knit families from Gujarat to Tamil Nadu, elderly men find themselves listening more than speaking, and sometimes hurting more than they show. What once felt like a normal conversation slowly starts to carry tones of sarcasm, disrespect, and even humiliation. And when that disrespect becomes a daily experience, it does not just affect the heart, it begins to affect the body. You may not realize it at first, but science tells us that emotional stress is as harmful as physical injury. Disrespect in any relationship chips away at self-worth, and for older adults in India, that loss of self-respect is quietly dangerous. Whether it comes through mocking words, dismissive gestures, or constant interruptions during a simple family discussion, it leaves a deep impact. Over time, these subtle wounds create emotional bruises that no one else can see. This is not about ego. This is about identity. The same identity you have built through decades of hard work, sacrifice, and silent service to your family and society. Let me share the story of Mr. George, a 72-year-old retired school teacher from Kerala, who had once been admired by students and neighbors alike. After retirement, he looked forward to quiet evenings with his wife, long phone calls with his daughter in Bengaluru, and early morning walks near the backwaters. But slowly, he noticed his wife speaking to him differently, cutting him off mid-sentence, correcting him in front of others, and occasionally mocking his forgetfulness. At first, he laughed it off. Maybe she's just tired, he told himself. Maybe I am too sensitive. But deep inside, something was shifting. The man who once led morning prayers in his school now felt unsure while speaking at the dining table. This is where emotional well-being meets science. The brain, when exposed to frequent disrespect, begins to see it as a threat. This activates the body's fight-or-flight response, releasing cortisol and other stress hormones. In seniors, elevated cortisol levels can lead to disturbed sleep, memory problems, high blood pressure, and even suppressed immunity. Worse still, the constant self-questioning and quiet sadness can spiral into isolation and depression. In Indian culture, we often avoid confrontation out of respect for peace. But when peace turns into pain, it is no longer harmony, it becomes silent harm. Healthy love is not loud, but it is kind. It allows space for mistakes, respect for silence, and honor for each other's presence. For seniors across India, from the narrow lanes of Varanasi to the apartment blocks of Navi Mumbai, this message is for you. If someone repeatedly disrespects you, it is not a small matter. It is your health, your dignity, and your joy that is at stake. Recognizing this pattern is the first step toward healing, not just from illness, but from invisibility. You deserve relationships where you are heard, seen, and valued, not just for what you've done, but for who you are now. And if this message feels like it was meant for you, stay with me. Because what we talk about next could change the way you care for your own emotional health starting today. There is a kind of pain that doesn't come from the body, but from the way you are spoken to, especially when it happens every single day. In many Indian families, especially in the later years, older men like you may start to hear more complaints than compliments, more judgment than joy. At first, it may seem harmless, a remark about your clothes, a comment on how you forgot something, or a question about why you sit quietly all day. But over time, this pattern becomes a heavy rain that slowly washes away your self-confidence, one drop at a time. And for elders in India, this quiet erosion of dignity is often ignored, even though it affects health as deeply as any disease. Let me share the story of Mr. Joe, a 78-year-old retired teacher from Pune who lived a quiet and respectful life after decades in the classroom. In his younger days, students looked up to him and colleagues came to him for advice. But now, inside his own home, his opinions were questioned, his habits criticized, and even his hobbies laughed at. He tried to adapt. He stopped wearing certain colors. He changed his daily routine to please his wife. But no matter what he did, there was always something wrong, something not good enough. This kind of constant criticism is more than just disagreement. It is a pattern of emotional harm. When someone repeatedly points out your faults, even small ones, your brain begins to feel unsafe. Science shows us that the brain reacts to emotional criticism the same way it reacts to physical danger. It activates a region called the amygdala, which triggers the release of cortisol, the body's stress hormone. When cortisol stays high, especially in seniors, it weakens your memory, increases your blood pressure, and disrupts your sleep and digestion. In Indian culture, where we value peace at home, many elders remain silent in the face of constant judgment. You may think it's just words, or at this age, why start conflict? But silence becomes a habit, and soon you find yourself withdrawing from conversation, even from joy. You avoid speaking, fearing you will be mocked. You stop expressing opinions, fearing they will be rejected. Over time, this leads to emotional isolation, which is now proven to be one of the biggest risk factors for mental decline among older adults. And it is not just the mind that suffers. Research from AIIMS and Indian geriatric studies shows that loneliness and emotional stress weaken immunity, making the body more prone to infections, arthritis, and even cardiac issues. The loss of identity of who you are and what you bring to the family can make daily life feel meaningless. But it doesn't have to be this way. Respect is not a luxury. It is your birthright regardless of your age. So if you feel that your value is being constantly questioned, it's time to pause and reflect. Not to fight, but to protect your peace, your health, and your spirit. Because healing after 65 is not just about medicines. It is about being seen, being heard, and being loved for who you truly are. In the later years of life, what we carry in our heart often matters more than what we carry in our hands. For many elders in India, the heaviest burdens are not physical, they are emotional. Words spoken again and again. Words that question your worth, your memory, or your efforts begin to settle inside the mind like dust on old furniture. You may not notice it at first, but slowly this emotional weight begins to affect how you sleep, how you speak, and how you see yourself. And this is exactly where health and emotions meet, especially in older age. Scientific studies from institutions like NIMHANS and AIIMS show that chronic emotional stress in older adults leads to faster cognitive decline and memory problems. Your brain, especially after 60, depends on calm, meaningful interactions to stay sharp, motivated, and emotionally balanced. But when you're constantly criticized, whether for how you dress, how you forget something, or how you speak, it activates your brain's threat system. This system releases stress hormones like cortisol, which in high amounts over time damage areas responsible for memory, emotion, and decision-making. You may begin to feel anxious, unmotivated, or emotionally tired without any clear reason. Mr. Joe, a retired bank manager from Bhopal, once shared how everyday remarks from his spouse changed the way he saw himself. In the beginning, it was just small things. Why are you always repeating stories? Or you can't even remember to lock the door. But over the months, these remarks became more personal, more frequent, and more painful. He began speaking less, avoiding family dinners, and even stopped attending his Sunday morning satsang at the temple. His smile faded, not because of illness, but because of a slow loss of self-worth. And that is the deeper danger when constant criticism comes not from strangers, but from those we live with. It doesn't only affect how we feel about ourselves, it also shapes how others treat us. When your partner constantly puts you down, your friends and even children may begin to second-guess your abilities. You start losing not just confidence, but connection. And that's when social isolation begins to grow silently. Isolation, as modern geriatric research shows, is one of the biggest health threats for Indian seniors today. But there's a difference between helpful feedback and harmful criticism. Feedback helps you grow. It's specific, respectful, and comes with love. Criticism, on the other hand, is vague blaming and meant to control. Phrases like, "you always mess things up," or "you're not good at anything" are not truth. They are tools of emotional harm. Recognizing this difference is not only wise, it is necessary for your mental and physical well-being. If you find yourself in such a pattern, don't ignore it. Start by acknowledging the impact of these words on your emotional state. Set gentle but firm boundaries on what kind of communication is acceptable, and if needed, take steps to protect your peace. Because these years, your golden years, are meant to be filled with dignity, calm, and companionship, not the echo of constant fault-finding. Guard your worth, my friend. You have lived through decades of change, challenge, and contribution. Don't let anyone steal your joy now, not with words, not with silence. Sometimes the words that hurt the most are not shouted, they're spoken in a flat, tired voice like a door quietly closing. When someone says, "I don't care anymore," it may sound like a moment of frustration, but for older adults in India, it often signals something deeper. It is not just about one argument or one evening. It is about the slow disappearance of connection, like a deer burning low, one drop of oil at a time. And for elders who already face shrinking social circles and quiet homes, this emotional distance can feel even heavier. It begins as silence, but ends up as loneliness hiding inside the walls of the very house you helped build. Let us take the story of Mr. George, a 74-year-old retired postmaster from Madurai who once shared everything with his wife. They used to sit on the terrace and talk about the news, the neighbors, the dreams they once had. But slowly, her responses shortened. Her eyes stopped meeting his. The curiosity was gone. And when she finally said, "I don't care anymore," it felt to him like a thread snapping somewhere deep inside. It wasn't anger, it was absence. A quiet confirmation that something once alive between them had slowly faded without notice. From a medical point of view, emotional withdrawal in long-term relationships is not just a social issue, it's a neurological and psychological risk. When an older adult feels rejected or emotionally abandoned, it activates the limbic system of the brain, especially the amygdala linked to emotional fear and stress. This process increases levels of cortisol, a stress hormone that over time weakens memory, disturbs sleep, and lowers immunity. Chronic emotional disconnection has been linked to higher risks of anxiety, depression, and even cardiovascular problems, especially in those above 65. And in Indian elders who often rely heavily on the emotional stability of family, the impact is even more pronounced. But it is not just about the mind or the heart. When trust, communication, and empathy vanish from a relationship, it begins to show up in other areas too. You may find yourself less interested in food, skipping your evening walk, or staying in bed longer. Simple pleasures like reading the newspaper or watering the tulsi plant feel empty. That's because your brain is quietly registering a loss and your body is following. In many Indian homes, this issue is silently accepted. We are taught to adjust, to tolerate, to believe that emotional distance is part of growing older. But it does not have to be that way. Emotional health is just as important as blood pressure or sugar levels, and just as treatable when addressed early. Sometimes it starts with a conversation, sometimes with quiet reflection, and sometimes with a decision to protect your peace. If you feel that your presence no longer matters in your own home, that your words float unheard, please don't ignore it. You deserve connection even in the smallest of gestures. A look, a word, a shared moment over chai. And if that is missing, take the step to either mend it or create new spaces where your heart feels alive. Because growing old in India should not mean growing invisible. You are still here. And your voice, your heart, your presence still matter deeply. Sometimes two people can share the same home, the same meals, even the same bed, and still feel like strangers to each other. In many Indian households, especially after the children have grown and left, couples in their 60s and 70s begin to live in quiet parallel worlds. What was once a bond of shared dreams slowly fades into a routine of daily tasks spoken without emotion and met with silence. And for the elder who still longs for companionship, this emotional absence begins to feel heavier than any physical pain. It is not always anger. It is not always fighting. Sometimes the most dangerous thing is apathy, when the heart of the relationship stops beating. From a psychological perspective, this is known as emotional withdrawal, and it's one of the most unspoken causes of stress in elderly relationships. According to modern attachment theory, humans, regardless of age, need emotional safety, responsiveness, and support in close relationships. When one partner becomes distant or emotionally unavailable, it creates a feeling of being emotionally unsafe, like standing on shaky ground. For older adults in India especially, those whose other relationships with friends or siblings may have faded, this disconnection hits even harder. The partner becomes the only emotional anchor, and when that anchor disappears, the heart feels adrift. And it doesn't stop at emotion. Chronic emotional stress from relationship detachment is known to increase blood pressure, disturb sleep, and even weaken the immune system. Research in Indian settings, including studies from AIIMS and senior mental health centers in Bengaluru, show clear links between emotional neglect and declining physical health. Elders may begin to experience headaches, digestive issues, or fatigue not from illness but from silent grief. This is why it's so important to pay attention not just to the words in your home, but also to the silences. Take the example of Mr. and Mrs. Raghavan from Coimbatore, who after 45 years of marriage now barely exchange more than a few sentences a day. Where they once spoke about dreams and memories, they now only talk about groceries or doctor's visits. Communication has become transactional, like roommates, not soulmates. Misunderstandings pile up, but neither speaks of it. Resentment simmers quietly while the warmth slowly disappears from daily life. This emotional detachment has a ripple effect. Family and friends notice the change, the forced smile, the cold tone, or the lack of shared laughter. Some may try to intervene, but others may pull away, sensing discomfort. The social circle shrinks, and with it, so does emotional strength. In Indian culture, where joint families once protected elders from isolation, this modern emotional drift often goes unnoticed, and the cost is high. Social isolation combined with emotional neglect is now a proven risk factor for cognitive decline and mental health issues like anxiety and depression in seniors. The mind begins to lose sharpness when it has no one to connect with meaningfully. But the most painful part is that emotional withdrawal often creeps in slowly, quietly, until it becomes the new normal. So if you're noticing that your partner no longer listens, no longer responds, or no longer sees you, don't ignore it. This is not just a phase. It's a call to action, for awareness, for conversation, and maybe for healing. Because in your golden years, you deserve more than just presence. You deserve companionship. You deserve to be heard. And above all, you deserve to feel alive in your own home. Sometimes the words that sting the most don't come from strangers, they come from someone you have shared your life with for decades. And in many Indian families where relationships are built on years of sacrifice, hearing, "It's all your fault," can feel like a cut that runs deep. For seniors who have walked together through life's ups and downs, raising children, facing health scares, building a home, such a phrase is more than anger. It signals something more serious, a quiet breakdown of trust, of shared understanding, and of emotional safety within the relationship.